Here's the funny thing about being a Scrum Master compared to a project manager. We are far more likely to warn the team if they are overcommitting than we are to worry if they undercommit. Come on, guys, really? 37 hours? I know you're a better team than that. What do you say we pull in one more story? So sprint planning. There was a new section added to sprint planning, and that section was called Why. The sprint goal has been around for a while, but they didn't have a formal section for it. It was just thrown into the how part of the meeting before. Now it has its own special section, the why part. And what it says is basically the product owner proposes the goal, or what we're supposed to be about. But then the team itself has to come up with the goal. So the product owner is leading the conversation, but the entire Scrum team must agree on the sprint goal. Okay. And that it must be finalized by the time sprint planning is done. Now, what's interesting about this is the thing that's actually locked down at the end of sprint planning is not the detailed plan. It is not the list of the stories. It's the goal. So we should probably spend a little time on this, right? Make sure we're clear, because the goal is not subject to change after the end of the sprint planning meeting. It's locked down. Okay. So, and here's this part about single objective for the sprint. So back to that question we had about, what's supposed to be in the sprints, the single objective for the sprint. They seem to be really into that single focus thing in a lot of levels now in Scrum Guide. Okay. So now, years and years and years ago, probably 10 years ago now, you used to commit to the sprint backlog, meaning the actual items. What was kind of the problem with that, do you think? What's the problem with committing to the actual items in the world of complex work?
Items will change.
Yeah, things change.
Stuff changes, right? New things come in. We're wrong about what the effort was on certain things because it's complex. It's inherently unpredictable. And so they kept getting nagged, the guys who did the Scrum Master, why do you keep saying it's a commitment? And they're like, well, there needs to be a commitment. And so finally they decided the goal was the commitment, but not the actual list of items. So the team has tremendous flexibility in deciding to update their product backlog, the sprint backlog, in order to meet the goal. So if they need to pivot and change based on something they just learned, they're allowed to do that. So the developers are in charge of the sprint backlog. So that's the why section. The goal, it's really about the goal. And then there's a section we're skipping for this moment called the what, which is the pieces we're going to pull in. But then there's the how. And in the how, traditionally, teams have tasked their stories. Now, you no longer have to do that. It's left up to the team. But traditionally, we broke stories down into little technical tasks, 1 day or less, usually one person's name on them. This is very traditional. And sometimes we put hours on those tasks. Now, why a day or less, do you suppose? Sprints like 2 weeks long. Why can't it be like, 5 days of work in the task or something?
Because testing?
Yeah, it's partly about the idea that there's multiple pieces, right? And we want to make sure they all come together. The other one, though, has to do with the self-managing nature of the team. By making sure every item is only a day or less, what meeting does that mean I might use to inspect how we're doing?
Daily.
A daily Scrum, right? Yeah. So if I come in 3 days in a row and say, "Hip, still working on my 1 day task, it's all good," who's supposed to call me on that?
The team.
The team itself. That's correct. So it makes it easier for the team to self-monitor because we know the tasks are supposed to be short. So I shouldn't be coming in multiple days still working on the same task. Okay. So if we do this, then all these things together are what we call the sprint backlog, the goal, the stories, and the tasks. Okay. So what do we do in this meeting as a Scrum Master? Well, sometimes we collect the team's capacity at the beginning of the meeting. Now, we threw around a couple words here, right? We said velocity earlier, and we defined that as the number of points you get done on average in a sprint, right? Now I'm talking about something different, capacity. So what is capacity? Well, not clearly defined in the Scrum Guide, but often interpreted as how many hours or days am I available to work items in this sprint? So this is where we can allow for things like vacation, getting multitasked, even though that's not a good idea, holidays, all of this kind of stuff. So sometimes at the beginning of the meeting, the product owner roughly says to the team, guys, how many hours are you around to work, on our items this sprint? And they give us a number. Now let's say we're doing 2-week sprints, and let's say somebody is 100% available to us, but we're looking for task working hours, meaning not any other kind of overhead or meetings or anything. What do you think is the maximum number of hours they should say to us in 2 weeks?
40, 50.
Those are all pretty good numbers, I think. 64 is usually considered the absolute maximum. That's 80% of an 80-hour 2-week period. So even, even the Scrum meetings take up, 15% maybe. So it's probably never more than 64, but it could be a lot less, right? Depending on various things.
Right.
So now, question? Okay. So now we add up all those hours from all those teams. And sometimes we're going to write that up on the board like this and say, okay, team, you've told me now that we have 178 hours as a team to get our work done. Now the team starts, let's say, doing tasks. So they start creating some tasks. And they define this first task in the first story. And they together decide that they think it's about 7 hours of work. And here's the term we used to always use. The average skilled developer will take this many hours to get this thing done. I'm sure that causes some thoughts for some of you, but the average skilled developer is going to take how many hours? The team says 7. And now I scratch out the 178 and I write 171. Now they get their second task. They decide it's about 4 hours. I scratch out the 171. I write 167. What am I doing here? You see how it's kind of like I'm not really making anything up here, am I? I'm just reflecting back to them. What did they tell me? I'm just reminding them, this is how many of your hours you said you had, and this is how many you've chewed up right now in your estimates. This is how many you might have left at this point. So I'm giving them information to make a better decision. Let's test that theory. So we keep burning it down. They keep making tasks. We've gone on for an hour or two now, and they get down to 37 hours shown on my chart. And now the team says, I think we're going to call that good. That is our plan for the sprint. What do you imagine your job is now as the Scrum Master? Not totally clear, but I think your job is probably to say, okay. Now that might hurt you just a little bit, because what was our job as a project manager at this point?
Divvy up tasks.
Pretty clear, right? Yeah, we'd say something like, oh, come on, guys, really? 37 hours? I know you're a better team than that. What do you say we pull in one more story? Feels like pushing. Okay. So this is an interesting dynamic in this meeting. Here's the funny thing about being a Scrum Master compared to a project manager. We are far more likely to warn the team if they are overcommitting than we are to worry if they undercommit. Not because we think they're going to be lazy or anything, but because we trust that they're going to pull more in if they get done early. So it's no biggie.
What do we do if the team's divided? So at 37 hours, somebody says, oh, we're good right here. And somebody else says, no, I think we can take on a couple more.
Yeah, now we pull out our facilitation skills and we start helping them talk through what's the right answer, do you think, guys? And so we're going to try to help them come up with a consolidated answer on that. might mean a little side conversation about why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that way? Okay. So this is just something we sometimes do in this meeting. And that's called burning down the hours or the various things